this evening to talk about attracting birds to the landscape with trees and shrubs. And I'll let her introduce the highlights or what we need to know about herself. Welcome. Sorry I'm late.
You're fine. Hi. It's an honor to be with you. Thank you for asking me to share some insights on some plants that we could use for our landscape. And of course, you know, there's many. So the topic was more on trees and shrubs. If you didn't pick up handouts, or if you want to share handouts, you're welcome to take any of this information. This is our University of Kentucky information. We did have to borrow from Purdue because that was a great list of some of the plants. And also, I'll have a little bit of an advertisement at the end that I need some help with. So we'll go on for the birds. So when we think about attracting birds to our landscape, we have to think about what do they like, what do they need, why should they come to see me or see my plants? And it would be because they need cover and they need food. We also want to look at a diversity of plants. We don't want to do the same thing, and we want to look at our landscape or our neighbor's landscape and see what's already there. Why should we put more of the same? You won't see maples in this presentation because there's a lot of maples already planted. So some things are already overplanted. So that's what we want to be careful of. Then two, what the birds prefer, of course, and because we have so many different species, we need trees that are really tall and big for certain birds. Then we come down to understory trees for the next group of birds that prefer that habitat, on down to larger shrubs and then smaller shrubs. So thinking about that layered effect is also important to meet the variety of birds' needs in their habitat. And of course, when we think about the plants, the plant that we want to put in has to match its growing site. If it's a plant that likes it dry, but it's wet, there's no reason to put that plant in that site, is there? Because we're just going to be sad and say, well, that one didn't grow. Well, we put it someplace that it didn't like to be growing originally. So we have to think about what is the plant like itself. And of course, include native plants, because with the native plants, we have the insects that go to those plants. And we have the birds that are used to going and getting those insects that are with those particular plants, and they've all evolved together. The only thing about including natives, though, know your plant. Because with natives, you may have a little more than you bargained for. Okay. And really, a lot of the plants you'll see are really not for small landscapes. There may be some things we can do, but most of these natives you'll find out that they're bigger plants. So I broke these down into different sizes. So we're going to go with shrubs. And in the shrubs I have everything from small up to larger sizes all mixed together. But it was an easier way to figure out how to let you know what some of these plants are. That would be great for the birds. This arrowwood viburnum dentatum, is about 6 to 15 feet tall and spread. Now you'll see a big wide range, and a lot of that is due because if it likes where it's growing, it's going to be bigger. If it doesn't really like where it's growing as well, it'll be a little smaller. So many times it'll vary a little bit. Sometimes too, when we look at some of these plants, it depends on if they were grown by seed. So you may have a little bit of variation depending on where you get these plants, especially those that are the native plants. Also, sometimes the nursery stock, if you get it farther out of the south, it's not going to be as hardy as if you get it from the north. So be careful with the plant and where it comes from or the provenance of it. This particular plant as the native is zone 2 to 8, so it's quite a wide range that it has. Moderately well-drained soil, what does that mean? Usually the soil, when you do a percolation test, you dig a hole, and you can dig it about shovel or 12 inches to 8 inches deep, about that same width, fill it full of water, then come back, fill it again. And it should start to be draining at least an inch an hour or more. If it just kind of sits there, like I had one instance one time, and I instructed the person before I came to the site visit, go ahead and fill it with water and then drain it out and just time it and see how long it comes out. Next day, I get there and I'm like, did you just put water in it? No, that was from yesterday. Okay. So even if it's on a hill, the internal drainage is not always there. It could be very tight soil that we have, the silt loam kind of soils that we have. So even though it's on a hill, when we dig that hole in that hillside, it could still create a pot and be very poorly drained. So know the drainage. Sun to partial shade. So again, if this plant will take full sun, but if we put it in partial shade, it may not be as big as if it was out in full sun. But it can tolerate it, and it'll look, decent and like the shrub it should be. Also, too, if we're thinking about our landscape, I like different interests of those plants. So if they're going to be there, not only for the birds, but for me, too, to enjoy the pretty flowers if it has any. And of course, if we have flowers, we have to have flowers to have fruit. So that's why, let's take advantage of it. So it's a white flowers of the viburnum in about May. Then throughout the summer, the fruits develop and they're blue then at the end. Some of these will turn from red to blue, so it'll depend. You'll see different colors listed of the fruit. But this one matures to a blue fruit in September to October. And some of these persist throughout the winter. And you've seen this before too. You'll see maybe way out in the field, you'll see, that particular plant has red berries. That's interesting. Wonder what that is in the fence row. So that's what we call persist. The birds haven't eaten them yet, but they will. Another part, I thought about it and almost didn't include this, but I looked at a beautiful hickory this morning in my yard, back in the back corner, and I thought, oh, I forgot fall color. So with the fall color on this one is a yellow to reddish purple. The only thing on this one is it suckers. So if you have a small area and you're putting this in, keep up with those suckers or it's going to be a thicket over time. And then you'll end up having to pull it all out because you can't get it cut apart to keep it in size. Many of these you can keep in size, but it's going to take some work and some pruning. Black haw, and as I did this, I thought, I can't find any natives, and then I think I found most of these are natives in this presentation. But the Viburnum prunifolium, this particular one is 12 to 15 feet tall and 8 to 12 feet at maturity. So again, remember, if you want to keep these smaller, you'll definitely have to prune them every year. Watch your timing, because if you prune it at the wrong time of year, you won't have any fruit. Okay? So most of these that bloom before the end of May, you go ahead and prune them after they bloom. They bloom on old wood. If it blooms after May, it blooms on new wood, so you can prune it as we come into the winter time. It's fine, and you won't lose your berries. So just a little bit of a hint. So this one has white flowers, full sun or shade. The nice thing about this one is it adapts to a wide variety of soil types. Because unfortunately, fortunately, you know how our weather swings. We're in that El Nino now, dry conditions. So this one's going to do well in a dry soil. Then this is a case where that fruit, and it gives us interest. This really pretty reddish colored fruit then will turn into a bluish later. And then the leaf color for us is purplish to red, so really pretty leaf color for us. And of course, this one can be pruned to a tree, a specimen tree, or into a shrub. Just takes a little bit of time, a little bit of work with it.
What do you mean specimen tree?
When you talk about a specimen tree, it's a tree that is featured in your landscape. So you would actually see it as one plant, not a group of plants. And it would also be like a focal point that you want to see. If it's close to something that you want to focus on. Of course with the birds, I'm not too fond of, and I don't think I could train them unless you all have, before they decide to go use the bathroom. So, you know, these may be things that you'll need to think about too. So you may not want them real close to the house or to your sidewalks.
Your car.
Or your car, exactly. But it would be a good plant that, say, in the corner of this room, maybe that's the corner of your landscape. That could be a feature in your landscape. And it would just be one of them, and then everything would kind of point to that plant to look at as a specimen plant. With it, sun, well-drained soil, again, small white flowers in April, and again, that fruit changing to purple, red to purple. With this choke cherry, the Prunus virginiana. It's kind of interesting that it's in the Prunus family, or the genus, but this one also, again, suckers, and they were showing it more into a tree form. So it's your preference, how you would like it. Highbush cranberry, this is the Viburnum trilobum. This is really a nice plant. You can see in this picture, nice, again, a nice large shrub. This one is mid to late May, so that's kind of nice. It's a little bit later. 8 to 12 feet tall and spread, a little more controlled, which is nice. Then it also has bright red fruit in early September. That yellow to reddish purple fall color. Now this one though does not like excessive water stress, so it needs water. It's going to have to be watered. Our general rule is about 1 inch of water a week. So if nature doesn't supply it, then we need to supply it. And of course, we slow down as we get into the fall and winter, but it's still going to need, if we get really dry and stay dry, some of our landscape plants and trees are really going to need water. This is not my favorite plant. This is northern bayberry, but I think it's still a good plant. And again, it usually has abundant fruit. It would probably, for me, it would be back in the corner of my landscape, you know, kind of tucked away. But other people may really like this plant. I don't think it's quite as tight and neat of a plant, but everybody has their own preference, so that's why I put it in here. The Myrica pennsylvanica. 5 to 12 feet, I see it more of the 12 feet tall and spread. Again, poorer soil is acceptable, and that's another plus. Because if you don't have, you know, the rich, moist soil that lots of things prefer, this is where that one can go. This one has both male and female flowers on the same plant. So it's March to April. And then the fruit is kind of waxy and coated. But I guess one reason I'm not as fond of this plant is because there's no fall color, really. It just kind of dies and it's there. But I think the best part about it is some of the waxy fruit. It's really pretty. Benefit. This is this possum ilex. It is a holly, but it is deciduous. So that's what it says, Ilex decidua. So it's about 10 to 20 feet tall, a little less than spread. And I do like the deciduous hollies. They're really pretty, especially, you'll notice it as you're doing your bird count. And if you're in fence rows in different places, you may find some of these are native, may find some of these in fence rows. Every once in a while you can pick them out going down the road. They're really pretty. Full sun to part shade. Now one nice thing on this one is it's poorly drained soil. And it could go well drained, but if you have a spot where some of the water will sit in your yard or more, not constantly sit, but you know, more of a damp area, this would be a good plant for it. It also is full sun to that part shade. Nice color in the fall, but it's probably more the fruit yellow, with the fruit being that scarlet red, and you can see it. The nice thing too, it's a little bit higher pH than the winterberry. We'll talk about that in just a minute. The winterberry is also a deciduous holly. Now this one can form a thicket, so if you have a place on your property where you kind of need a thicket, maybe area or a place to block, or you have a area you want to put kind of a hedgerow, this would be a plant you could use. Then spice bush is very, very common, and you can see too, you know, some of these things you hear are also from butterflies, and you may hear from pollinators, so there's a lot of different benefits. And of course, for the birds need those insects as food as well. So it's a lot of benefits to these particular plants. The spice bush is about 6 to 12 feet tall and spread. It's zone 4 to 9. In more shade, it'll be a smaller plant. Full sun, it'll be a little bit bigger. Bright scarlet fruit in September. And it can be used for naturalizing in areas. It does have yellow flowers versus the white flowers. But again, it can be used for kind of naturalizing areas. Zone 4 to 9, and we're in zone 6 is where we are. We're in 6. Now this one I threw in, this one is taking a spin off of a native. The button bush is a native. The button bush that I remember could fit and almost take up the whole space of these 4 seats all the way halfway back. Wow. It was huge, and it was in a wet area. And I thought, well, that really is not feasible for a lot of landscapes. So I put this one in as sugar shack. This is an example of a cultivar, and many of these natives will also have cultivars. Just read as far as this produces more berries or fewer berries depending on your desire. This one's only 4 to 5 feet tall, so that makes it easier to fit in your landscape. And it does take wet areas, a little bit of moist soil. So it has these flowers that cover the whole shrub. And it's later, in June, July, which is kind of neat, because then we have something else in our summertime to be blooming for us. Forms a little nutlet, attracts hummingbirds, and it's used for naturalizing in wet areas. So I thought something as an example, a little bit more suitable to some of our more home landscapes, depending on your size.
When they drop, are they soft?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure on that one. I don't think that they're not as big like a gumball.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Understand on that one. Here's the winterberry. This is the Ilex verticillata. It is, of course, native, and about 6 to 10 feet tall. So you can make it a shrub, you can make it a small tree as well. What I like about it is this poorly drained area is what is great for this one, but it'll tolerate well-drained soil too. If you want the most flowers out of it, or most flowers or fruit is full sun, it does prefer that pH though of 4.5 to 6.5. A lot of our landscape areas are about 6.5 to 6.7. So if you ever grew this one and it starts to look kind of yellowish, it just means the pH is not low enough, so there's not enough iron available to that plant in the soil. So it's really better to go a little bit lower pH. That's why the Ilex decidual, the other one, the possum hall, that particular one would tolerate a little bit higher pH. Bright red fruit in late August, and that's one that persists. So it'll stay there for a long time as the birds keep, finding it, but it doesn't fall off the plant. Leaf color is really not notable, but you don't need it with the berries on it. This one needs a male and female plant to fruit, because one plant has all the female parts and the other plant has the pollen for it. So you'd have to sneak in one male for 3 females. And it's the same with the possum haw too. So those hollies are male and female plants. But there are smaller cultivars available. Something called red sprite stays pretty small. So if there's birds that like that type of a habitat, those are available. Witch hazel is a native. They are, the hamamelis can be pretty large, 15 to 20 feet tall. Again, it could be almost to a small tree if you chose fewer, makes more of a trunk if you prune it so it doesn't have so many branches all coming up from the bottom. The neat thing is it has yellow strap leaves, and these are the little capsules later that are formed after those little strap-like flowers. And this one flowers in mid-October. So again, just have succession of different plantings throughout with a yellow color for its fall leaf foliage. This one can be pruned to shape. Prefers moist, but will tolerate well-drained soil. So some are a little more forgiving than others. This is again an example of a cultivar. This one is about 20 feet tall and spread. It's still fairly large. There are some smaller witch hazels. But this one again likes that moist, well-drained soil. And it shows you the strap-like petals. So that's the flower. This one though will start to bloom looking at February, March. So something very early to bloom. So something hopefully you can see from the house, or at least have a good set of binoculars to go and see and enjoy. But that way, and know where the plant is, a good plant to walk out to on one of those nice days. Fruit capsule is what it has, yellow fall-leaf color, and then again prune it if you would like to. But with that single quote around it, that is a cultivar. So they had the straight species, and then they found something out growing that looked like it was a little bit different, but still the same, but they liked the shape. It was different than the species, but it's only propagated by cuttings. It's never crossed with anything else. It's only done by cuttings in this case, to keep it true to type. So even though we talked about large shrubs could be put into trees, here are some that are still more tree-like. And I put in the flowering dogwood because I think we all love our flowering dogwoods. My only hesitation with it is that we have dogwood borers. So there's two options. Partial shade is best. It's really best as an understory tree. Do we have that option in all landscapes? No. But if you have that option, that's what I would do. If I didn't have that option, I'm not sure I'd include it in my landscape, just because of years of experience with the plant. Well-drained soil is important. Moist is nice, it'll grow better. Of course, we know the white bracts are really what looks like the flower, but that's a modified leaf, is the bract. And the yellowish part in the center is actually the flower. Glossy red fruit comes though in September. And then the fall leaf color is usually red to purplish, reddish purple. Those were probably the first thing that started changing this year. But it also says it changes that when it's under a little bit of stress. And we were dry through part of it, and then powdery mildew is another disease. But if we plant it as an understory tree, we tend not to have the dogwood borer problem. But it's still such a beautiful tree. So I had to include it. And then my other favorite, in the spring is the redbud. And Cercis canadensis, about 20 to 30 feet tall as it gets mature. Well-drained soil is best because if it sits in poorly drained areas, verticillium is an organism that will plug up its conducting tissue and then it wilts and dies. So it has to be well-drained. Otherwise it gets to be such a nice small tree and then all of a sudden it's dead. So well-drained is a must. Full sunlight shade, those really pretty reddish, purplish flowers. There is a brown seed pod. It's attractive in some The birds like that, or it's also nice habitat. Yellow, fall color, but definitely another one that could be your understory tree, or if you have room for a small tree. This is serviceberry. Have any of you heard it called sarvisberry? Sarvisberry may be another common name. I think it's called serviceberry because when that's about the time in the mountains, as I understand, that they were able then to have funerals because the soil wasn't frozen. So that's part of the serviceberry information. That's partly how it got its name. But the amelanchiers are really nice. This one is Amelanchier arborea. And 15 to 25 feet with about that spread, moist, well-drained soil, full sun to partial shade. It can go either way. The red fruit changed to purplish black, but you hardly ever see it. Guess why? Birds. They love it. Birds love it. I mean, this particular one I remember is edible if you can get to it before the birds. Okay, I think I've seen the pretty dark purplish black fruit once on those. These bloom so early too. It's usually like the Bradford pears bloom, and then around about the same time you'll see some of the serviceberry blooming too. Deep fall color, orange to deep red. Acidic soil though, so we're meaning below 7, 6.5, below would be fine too. An understory tree. I think it's one of my favorite small trees. Then a Washington hawthorn, Crataegus. This particular one could be a small tree, and with that, well-drained soil. Sun is important. White flowers, May, June, so that pushes our spring bloomers a little bit longer into the season. Bright red fruit in September, October. Scarlet leaf color. Now it will have thorns, so you have to be careful with that one. Don't be too personal with it.
Is it a particular disease it may be susceptible to?
On the berries,
Well, we've got one in the yard and it's all but died now, but the leaves, it leaves out and then they got little black edges on them and started falling off, and they just get less and less leaves over the last 3 years.
3
Something-
years.
Something attacked the leaves first. That's where it showed up in here anyway.
okay. I haven't had it diagnosed. It's a possibility, but I'm not sure.
And I would call them needles, not thorns.
I understand. Yes. You do have to be careful where you put your hand. So for the medium to large trees, and these may be plants that you'll either have to enjoy in somebody else's yard, or if you have a large enough yard, be able to put those on the edges of your property, or you may have a suitable place for it. Although this one's not as big. This is a 20 to 30 foot spread and tall plant, the Carpinus caroliniana, the American hornbeam. It has fruit, was more of a nutlet. It does have male and female flowers on the same plant. The color for the fall can be varied. Yellow through kind of red is what the literature says. Train it to a single trunk, or you could leave it shrubby if you would like. But if you train it to that single trunk, it has a pretty muscly wood. And you can it's very smooth, and you can kind of see it undulate in and out. So it's really pretty. One of the trees that, it's not so huge in your yard, is widespreading. It's a nice plant. The bald cypress, Taxodium disticum, of course it takes a lot of room. It can go in an area that is wet, that kind of helps dry it up, but remember it's going to put the knees up. Those are its roots to get oxygen. So you might want to mulch it instead of have to try to mow over it if you have a wet area, or it will go in well-drained soil. Then also compacted soil, but if it's compacted, it'll probably put the knees up in that soil. The sun, of course, the fall color is more of a brownish color. It is a conifer, but it is deciduous. Down in Florida, it wouldn't be. So great perching area for songbirds. The black gum, Nissus sylvatica, this one's beginning to be overplanted because we've been touting how nice it is. And they're becoming easier to transplant. Some of these natives are hard to transplant, so it's really suggested to get them in a container. You can't, and one, you don't want to just go dig it up somewhere that's not your property. If it is your property, then you get it small because it'll be hard to move. Well-drained soil is important for it. Again, sun, because it's so big. Now, this is another one that prefers that 5.5 to 6.5 pH. So my suggestion is always do a soil test where you want to put your tree, or any kind of landscaping that you're putting in, because then that'll tell us, whoops, wait a minute, you probably should pick something else besides this one if the pH is too high. And through the Davis County Extension Office, if you're a citizen of Davis County, it's free right now through Soil Conservation Service, a grant. So go ahead and get those done, right?
Thank you.
Fall is the perfect time to plant trees. Shrubs, let's go through December is fine. Soil's not frozen in January, plant them. Again, with a pretty oblong bluish black fruit and a pretty scarlet to purple leaf color. Now I wanted to add a couple evergreens because we know they need cover. And the eastern red cedar, definitely if it's in maybe a back area that you have. If you have trying to grow apples, you may not want to do this, although we have plenty of eastern red cedars around. There's a disease called cedar apple rust. So it makes it a little more challenging to grow apples if you do that. But still, all those blueberries, it's a great place for the birds. And of course, it's a pretty tolerant plant, tolerates many different soils, poor soils, full sun, evergreen, of course, but watch for bagworms. That might be its only, hesitation. And there are a bunch of different cultivars available of the Juniperus virginiana. And the other one I have is the Thuya occidentalis. They call it northern white cedar. It can go 20 to 30 feet tall with a 10 to 15 feet spread, if it likes it where it's at. Well drained, full sun evergreen, small little cones, used for cover for the birds. And again, this one will be susceptible to bagworms and then susceptible to ice damage. It's fast growing, weaker than wood because of its fast growing nature. Just a few more to talk about. This is a persimmon, the Diospyros virginiana. I would not recommend putting it close to your deck though. I did not plant it there, but the previous owner did. It's a beautiful tree. It does keep the sun out of our bay window in our kitchen. So that's why I haven't said, husband, just go cut it down. Someday he's going to get tired of it, and he will. But my mom said, why do you have that there? Well, cut it down. Well, I tolerate it. Just watch where I step. It's moist soil, but well drained is important. Getting it full sun with greenish white flowers, which you don't notice so much, but it's pretty now with all the fruit on it. It's pretty to sit in the kitchen, at the kitchen table and looking out and watching the birds feed on those persimmon fruit. October to November was those fruit are there matured with a yellow, reddish, purple color. It may sucker, could form thickets if you let it do that kind of thing. In the landscape, it's okay. Again, it has male and female trees. We got the female. The male's over on the other side. Or actually, it also takes 2 trees on that one. Yeah, male and female trees, yeah. Because I was looking, okay, we have one, how do we have fruit? It's across the way. Sweet gum, this one again, you don't want to put where you have to walk.
Yeah, right.
Because of the gum balls, which we don't like, but it's a 60 to 75 foot tall, very big spread, well drained to poor soil, so again, it depends on where you have to grow it. Flowers are not really showy. The fruit are large and messy, but has a really pretty fall color. I think that's its plus. And then again, plant away from your areas where you're going to walk. The tulip tree or the tulip poplar, the Liriodendron tulipifera, is a really nice tree. again, where people who live, when they came, they really planted and packed a lot of trees in. It's really too close for what we have, but it's really a nice, tall, straight tree. The flowers are yellow in June, and tall, meaning, that 70, 90 feet is its potential. Moist, well-drained soil. The cone-like is kind of like a tall cone with all these seeds packed into it. The fall color is yellow. The only thing that is a downfall is if you have the tulip tree, you probably have scale on it. And scale is an insect that it adheres to the plant and sucks out material from the plant, so don't park a car or anything underneath it. Okay, so that's good away. But the flowers are so pretty. But those tulip-like flowers, and the leaves are almost shaped like a tulip. But usually we just let the scale go to nature, or you can spray it with a dormant oil, meaning at a time when it's February, when you're not dropping below 40 degrees, then you can snuff it out. Or you have to get it when the crawlers emerge, when the eggs underneath their hatch. And then a white oak, and there are a lot of different oaks, as you know. But when I recommended any kind, it's the white oak that seems to get those horned oak galls, those big balls on those trees. This species tends to get those less than any of the other species, especially the red. Those fall in the family of the red oaks and the black oaks. So that's why I suggest the white oak if you wanted to plant an oak. Dark brown or dark red leaf color, not really a real pretty one, but it's host to many insects that the birds need as food. 50 to 80 feet tall. Again, a little lower pH is better for it. Of course, it'll produce acorns for other wildlife. These are the particular books I used. The one is the publication that we handed out. Sharon Sorensen, you've probably all heard of her. She has a really nice book of gardening for the native bird, attracting birds for the natives. And then Michael Durr is where all the information came from as far as the size of the plant and some of the other cultural characteristics. I didn't put sassafras in. I could have, but I thought against it because there's what's called laurel wilt, and it's a disease that is being carried by a little beetle. And once that beetle gets in there, it's a fungus, it plugs up all of its conducting tissue. It's called laurel wilt, but it's on sassafras, and it will take out the sassafras trees, and it's now in Kentucky. So that's why it's also good to plant diversity. So once something's gone out, we have something else to take its place. So I've enjoyed, this is my take on some of the plants and natives to attract birds. So if you have any questions.
Questions?
I have a question. Everybody knows this, probably knows this but me. What's the difference between a bush and a shrub?
Many times we just kind of throw those terms out. It's just about the same. So, one person may have a very specific idea of what a bush is, and some may have it as a shrub. To me, bush would be about the same as a shrub.
Okay.
So I've only just recently become like a big nature lover, and I only know about birds. This is the most information I have ever gotten about plants. Can you explain pH levels a bit
Okay,
more?
sure. pH is what we use. We take the soil and we measure pH of the soil. And that tells us how much hydrogen ions are in there, or calcium ions. Hydrogen goes more to the side where it goes down. That's the 4.5, 5.5. When we go from 7 is neutral, we go down. The calcium, the amount of calcium, we get more calcium in the soil. That's what brings that pH up. And what happens is, in between that, and if you looked at all these different elements that plants need, as you go from that real low pH up to the higher pH, certain nutrients become more available than others. And if we don't have that quite right for that plant, they can't take up the nutrients that they need.
Well, so, but is it acidic and alkali, is it that the, so which is which?
Acidic is low,
Low, okay.
alkaline is high.
Okay.
And we go from acidic to alkaline by adding lime, and then sulfur to go the other way, but it gets real hard to change the soil if we have too much calcium. It's just really difficult for it to kick off all that calcium, to get the hydrogen ions on it, to get that pH down, and it takes about a year to start changing. In some soils, it's a losing battle.
If having too much calcium in the soil is a problem, are all those eggshells I'm throwing into my compost, is that making a problem worse?
Not necessarily, because you're using a compost, and I think the key is to, once you use that compost and mix it in, and then, growing a crop, testing the soil, seeing if there is an issue or not. Because sometimes my grandfather always said we had to lime. If you constantly lime, then you're gonna have a problem. But the eggshells, I'm not sure there's quite that much. But it's always good to test your soil after you've put it on, and just to determine.
Okay.
If you put a lot of leaves on your garden, sometimes you start raising that pH.
Do you find many soil tests in this county on above 7? Probably mostly tend to be on the lower side.
Most, I see a lot of lower than 7. I don't really see, there's every once in a while something above 7. It goes by a logarithm, so 7.1 is 10 times more. So it's not like by a 1. So every once in a while I'll come across that, but usually you find out that they've limed a lot or.
Yeah. Well, being forest soils basically here, they tend to be on the acidic side anyway.
Certain areas, but in our gardens and other places,
Right.
depending on if we fertilized or not. But you're right. If you go into some of the native soils, you're going to stay about 6.5 maybe. So every once in a while that 5.5. It just depends on if they've maintained it or haven't. But you're right. That's why soil testing, and then we know, and then I can tell you what you might need, if you need any change or not. And then, too, for trees and shrubs, generally our phosphorus and potassium is enough, so you don't usually have to fertilize, but that's the key to know. Go ahead and try to test that soil, and then and amend it before you get that tree or shrub in. I mean, to plant trees and shrub properly, Cooperative Extension Service, we have a whole set of information on that. That's another topic.
If you've got poorly drained soil, is there very much you can do to change it?
It all depends on how much you want to do and what your property's like and where that's going to be drained to. Because I wouldn't want you to change your property and then be a problem for somebody else. Sometimes finding the right plants to put would probably be a suggestion. Or you might have to speak with, if you have a large property, that's the Natural Resource Conservation Service. If you have large land areas in town, you might have to talk with your builder or other people. It just depends. There's drains and different things you can do, but.
Well, I've put drains and things like that, but still that, right where the plant is setting, it's still poorly drained.
Yeah.
Some plants don't do well with that.
So that's where you find a few of these things that like that moist area, especially when it stays wet. If it gets wet and then it drains through, like we can do rain gardens, but it can't stay like a bog or can't stay constantly wet. That's where a few of these plants I mentioned today would go, like the ilex, if the pH is correct.
You mentioned the dogwood tree, and by Memorial Day you have to treat it for a borer. What is the treatment?
It would be a pesticide, an insecticide. Usually, I believe it's pyrethroids. They usually end in RIN as the active ingredient line, but the product you use, it needs to say for ornamental trees and for boring insects. Okay, that's what it's labeled for, and label is the law. And then we spray the trunk, the lower trunk, and the major branches. We don't have to spray the whole tree. We don't spray the leaves. It's just the trunk and major scaffold low branches. That's so when she comes and lays her egg, the eggs hatch, the larvae comes and they'll chew the bark and they'll eat the insecticide.
Will,
And won't go in.
will they kill, I was gonna have had a question about a stunted, dogwood. And is that the boar or the boar kill it, or will it stunt it, or both, or?
The boar basically over time kills the tree.
But if I have a stunted, like, it's sad at 3 foot for a year or two.
It could be other things. It just may not like where it's at, or it could be, look closely at the trunk. And again, too, the other thing is though, if you know you have a lot of birds, you may not be able to spray it. But if you want to keep the dogwood tree, you'll have to spray it.
Then what about that other dog with the Kusa or?
The Kusa, K-O-U-S-A,
Yeah,
Korean
they
dogwood.
planted downtown here, I think, and they had the little bloom like months and months longer.
yes.
Is that a good tree?
It's a good tree. It's not native, but it's
Yeah,
still
okay.
a good tree to get away from having to spray for the boars.
Oh, okay, so it's sort of a cultivar that doesn't.
Yeah, in this case, it's a different species.
Oh, okay.
In this case, but it does bloom with its leaves on. Our native dogwoods bloom when the leaves are not on it
Right,
yet.
that's true, yeah.
But it does bloom a month later.
Yeah.
Correct, and it has nice big fruit on it.
Yeah, it stays on a lot longer.
Mhm.
And no roses on your list?
Roses?
No?
No, they're not easy to maintain and not, as far as maybe the shrub roses possibly, but I didn't include those.
Yeah.
But if you're thinking of
Are
the
there some that are native?
old-fashioned roses, I'm not completely sure. I'd have to look that one up. But there's old-fashioned ones that, you might get. But that's really not anything they were
Not
planting for
attractive.
wildlife or
Yeah, it would be
attractive for
attractive
wildlife.
to birds.
I didn't know that you didn't say anything about flowering crab apple. What do you think about those? I mean,
They're fine. I didn't include it. Probably would have been one of those that was not native,
okay.
But some of them could be. It all depends on your definition of native. Because a crab apple is basically an apple that produces fruit that's 2 inches or smaller.
Well, and like in nurseries, they sell the pink and white flowering crab apples, just what they're labeled as, so.
Right. And they're fine. They have a lot of fruit, but you need to look for cultivars that are resistant to a couple of the diseases. Fire blight is one of them. Powdery mildew, that's more dogwood. I was trying to think, there's one more disease that they get and they'll defoliate pretty well.
Cedar apple rust, is that?
That's not, they'll get a little bit of that, yes, but it's right on the tip of my tongue. I couldn't remember it the other day either. I'll think about it soon, but it just defoliates it before you get a chance to even enjoy the flower, the plant. And then it affects the flowers next year, this amount of fruit next year. I just can't think of the disease, but it's very common. So look for disease resistant. Cherokee, I think is one of the names that I can remember that is disease resistant in crab apples. Plenty of fruit. I mean, there's nothing
Yeah,
wrong
they
with
do
that.
have it. And pollinators seem to really like them.
Yes, yes. Don't put it against right along your sidewalk though. Especially if you don't like to walk on all the fruit. And then watch the fruit size. So that's one to do more research on. But I think.
Tell that to the people that planted on the green belt.
Yeah, I know. So I think there's a lot more things to consider for that particular one.
I was gonna add a comment. I love that Annette picked the white oak. As you come into main campus, OCTC, we have the grove of trees for the science building, and there's all these oaks, and the signature one in the middle is the white oak, and in the last couple of years, some of the red oaks probably have the galls or are dying. The white oak seems to be doing really well, and just, if you just take a look, it's a pretty neat tree there.
Apple scab, I think, is the disease I was
Is that
thinking
other
about.
disease?
Yeah, that's why I researched the oaks, because I love the oaks, but with those galls on it, and we haven't found any way to control the galls, therefore, it's just gonna be disappointment as you try to grow them. We know the pin oaks in the town are just in the wrong spot. They like it swampier, wetter. But yeah, I think the crab apple is definitely doable. But I think there's other things you gotta consider about it. Get the right cultivar.
Great, well, thank you very much. Please come up and get some